for me. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our Wednesday webinar. This is our last webinar in September before we're all heading for Heroes Forum 16, and we thought the best way to get you all ready to come and see us in Atlanta is to have you guys have a teaser of some of the smartest people we've been able to attract to Forum this year. We also are wired here at Hero for continuous quality improvement, and one of the things that we think defines that attribute as a professional organization is an insistence that to get better and better at anything, that means change. And one way we'll change this field is to continue to infuse it with experts that are traditionally not close to our field. And so we are certainly doing that with our guest today, Lee Stringer from EYP and Phil Williams from Delos WebCore Builders. Both I've really gotten to know in the last couple of months and so enjoyed learning from them, and I'm certain that you will as well. Know that when they come down to Hero in September 27th through 29th in the Lowe's Atlanta Hotel, we hope you're registering to be there with them because they'll be together in a panel, and we have lots of other alternative thinkers for really advancing our field forward, like organizational development specialists, social psychologists, and the like. So we're in good hands today for our webinar in that Phil Williams is a 30-year veteran in the commercial design, engineering, and construction industry. He's most recently with WebCore Builders. He leads in sustainability, engineering, and consulting. He's an engineer by training, and the reason I know the depth of his knowledge is he was kind enough to host me and several other Hero members down at the Well Living Lab at Mayo's Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And man, was this an eye-popping experience, Phil, so thanks so much for hosting us there. You all, if you're not going to get to Minnesota anytime soon, can jump on this wellivinglab.com website and get a load of this Well Living Lab tour, this video that you can just click on and get a sneak peek into this revolutionary lab where they're talking about physical, technical capabilities and how you pull these together to make for a healthier indoor world. Delos and Phil's group are also prolific communicators about the various things they're working on. Their CEO, for example, Paul Scialia, has a wonderful video I previewed a bit this morning. Any room you're in is having an impact on your health, and 90% of the time I learn as I get to know Delos, we're indoors, you guys, so architects and people with the training at Delos are the ones that are really helping us understand the health effects of our living spaces. They have been active in the International Wellbeing Institute, and Phil, I understand you might give us a little insight into the Institute's work and the testing and the certification that comes out of this. That's on wellcertified.com. You can learn more about the well-being standards. Phil is joined today by Lee Stringer, another remarkable professional who, as much as her training and her expertise is in architecture, she has embraced sustainable strategies for employers with her book, The Green Workplace, and most recently, proud new reader of her new book called The Healthy Workplace, Tips on how to have a healthy workplace by losing weight, reducing stress, increasing all our productivity capabilities by having thoughtful design of our space. She's worked, as you can see in her profile, with folks as varied as GlaxoSmithKline, Zurich Financial, American Express, Georgia Pacific, and she speaks everywhere, you guys. She's been at Coronet Summits, IFMA, World Workplace. She's been interviewed by CNN, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Good Morning America. So she's a wonderful resource. Where I first came on to you, Lee, as you and I have chatted about it, is we both tend to like our blogging now and then, and so she and I both blogged about Pokemon just in the last month. She and I learned this morning by reading her latest blog, both actually got going on Pokemon with our little ones, and we're out and about in the community and learning about various fitness benefits. I'm not going to give you a spoiler alert on this column. I really do think you need to read A Good Walk Spoiled to see where she takes this thinking of hers, but I actually spent the morning on some of her other blog posts. Lee especially enjoyed your talking about the casino industry and how they have a lot to teach us in terms of keeping butts in the chair. I also read some this morning about the science behind happiness at work. So Lee is a prolific writer and a very good writer, I might add. I really enjoy her eloquence and her description of technical issues, but with great readability, I must say. So you can find Lee like you can find Phil on Twitter. She's got a wonderful Facebook page as well. And again, you're in good hands today. And we know that we're in good hands in terms of our participants. Not only did we get a great turnout, but I happen to know one of the first times that I got quite interested in architecture was when the Best Buy campus was built in this community of Bloomington. It's an amazing campus, and I happen to know someone who gave me a tour right when it was open. And they were so thoughtful in terms of the design of that space. Andy Strom is the leader of the facilities team there, and I happen to know he's got the whole team online for you guys today there at Best Buy. So you guys better be on your best game today as you present, because you've got some very smart and deeply informed people on the other end. And let's tap into them right off the bat, if we might. As you know, we get your attention as participants by doing polls after our presenters present, and so they're both ready to present a lot of information in a very short time on the nature of their work and how it relates to health and healthy workplaces. But let's hear from our audience first, you guys, and have you consider how they think about what you're about to present. So most people that attend our HERO webinars are HR professionals or wellness professionals. So like I've thought a lot in terms of the HERO Forum coming up, we're pushing the boundaries of our sphere of influence in organizations in good ways, I might say. But there's still boundaries, and so let me ask this question. I think, realistically, I can advance these workplace issues in the next 5 years. And so Marlene Abels is going to launch this poll and ask you to consider which boxes to check. And you can check all that apply. Is it better lighting and visual ambiance? Is it better sound, noise control, temperature? Can you mostly influence the physical space? Are you influential in layout? How about flexible scheduling policies? Or finally, remote virtual workplace policies? So as I know, the poll is open. And then, oh, good for you. Our participants are used to our webinars because they're coming in fast and furious, you guys, with their answers already. We've already got 60% have voted. So I'm going to wait just a second or two. Phil, let me start with you. Anything when you think about your interaction with non-architect professionals, what do you tend to find is the areas that they feel like they need the most help with?
Well, it's interesting, and thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. One of the things that we find is that the ability to bring real estate and the built environment, to be able to bring human resources, those three elements are very rare. So I like the fact that when you bring people together, we may have somebody who's got a nutrition bent. We may have somebody else who's got a technology bent, and it's all about circadian lighting. And we may have some folks who are much more about the overall policy in the workplace and stress reduction. So the ability to look at this as a la carte, or the ability to look at it as holistic, is sort of in our transitional phase of our industry. So you could probably have A through Z and not cover all the topics.
Yeah. Lee, any anticipation for you in terms of the poll results?
Well, I would think often the physical space layout is in control of real estate. It's a little difficult to be able to impact that. It takes a long time to lay out space and wait till the lease expires or whatever to make change sometimes. So I would think the remote work policies or flexible schedule would be a higher.
Well, Marlene, go ahead. And we've got 70% of our participants had voted. Marlene's going to launch the results for you guys to react to. I must say I'm quite surprised by this for the reasons both of you named. Look at that interesting, pretty darn equal distribution. So I'm going to let you interpret that, and then I have a premise of my own. But any reaction, Lee, starting with you?
Well, we have a group it sounds like they're pretty well-rounded, and they know that there are many ways that the physical space can impact employees. So that's great.
Yeah, you bet. Phil, any reaction to our findings here?
Well, you could say we're in trouble because we have equally bad. So maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I didn't go there, but you're right. 40% of the time, people are saying, I don't have control over any of this thing. My glass is a little more full than yours, Phil. I was impressed by this crowd saying, to go after it in all ways. So anyway, just a little sense of where their thinking is at. Let me start with you, Phil, and have you teach us a little bit about your work and the things you work on.
Well, again, thanks very much. And we have a lot of material here from a past-paced perspective. So I've got about 10 minutes after the hour, and we're going to make sure that we continue to stay on that overall schedule. So for us, it's the ability to understand, as we move on to the next slide, the ability to understand that everything we really do is based upon coincidence. If we spend a lot of our time indoors, whether that's where we work, live, sleep, there's an opportunity to have our workplace be more than just to do no harm. And moving on from do no harm currently means in many cases we're about benign. The other element is that we spend a lot of our money on our people. We have a tremendous focus on energy and real estate, but in actuality, people are about 90% of our spend no matter where we're at. And I think these are just the facts that when you put those together. The other element is key is that we've almost self-optimized our space. Never have we really put doctors and health science in the same room with building scientists and architects and with human resources and business economics. And when you do that, you have a tendency not to get the best overall environment. So as we move on, we're in buildings a lot, we spend a lot of money on people, and we're not doing as good a job as we could. Sounds like a pretty good opportunity. The ability, whether you are in commercial real estate, human resources, whether you're a landlord or a tenant or an owner-occupier, every one of these elements of attracting and retaining, whether it's talent or business, fewer negatives, one less sick day, or potentially even better ideas, more human interaction, are those key. And to believe that the built environment can actually accentuate all of those is a key element. And so from that perspective, this is the multilingual slide that if you can find yourself in any one of those quadrants, and I would also challenge it that your organization is in all of those quadrants, and that potentially the ability for us to appreciate who else is around the table and which one of those four are the prime driver at any one place or time is critically important. So as we move forward, one of the things that we recognize is that the well building standard that's really administered by the International Well Building Institute, which is a public benefit corporation, is not brand new in terms of the idea. So go back about 7 years when we recognized the huge focus on environmental sustainability was critically important, but the opportunity to potentially enhance that and include people. So in October of 2014, it was physically launched the well building standard for commercial office. And shortly thereafter, it was extended to multifamily K-12 education, and as recently as last year, the ability to extend that to cities and communities and districts. Just like with traditional sustainability, didn't stop at the sidewalk. So the goal here is to be able to bring great information for people to use at one particular time, not as individual experts, but as a collection of great work. So you can remember those three silos. How about actually merging those together and providing a resources for all of us, whether we're in human resources, space planning, architecture, engineers. And the result of that work is really what we call the International Well Building Standard, and it's available for free as a public document. It's wellcertified.com, and it's designed to be, I'm going to call it multilingual in terms of understanding it takes a lot of places, a lot of people, a lot of spaces, a lot of parts of the industry to make it happen. And so the ability to bring evidence-based peer-reviewed medical work together was key. My original involvement was a peer reviewer coming from the design build world to understand it's not just important in terms of theory, but how do we actually organize this so we can implement it. And that's what the standard does. Again, free download at wellcertified.com. From there, what we need to recognize is that the standard itself wasn't 5 people sitting in a room. It was going to the best medical institutions, and whether that be physical science, social science, mental science, environmental science, from the Mayo Clinic to Columbia and everyone in between, to recognize that it wasn't about doing 20 years worth of research. It was harvesting, gleaning the best available research that already exists. And from there, we moved on from the medical community to, I'm going to call it, our world, the architects, the engineers, the owners who were engaged in this process. And again, this was where I was at, to be able to take the theory and put it into an implementable standard that is organized from A to B to C, and that really allows all of us in the community to get closer together. The other element that I think is key as you move forward is that it is in complete collaboration with sustainability, whether that's the United States Green Building Council, whether that has to do with Living Building Challenge, whether that has to do with Green Star in China or BRE out of the UK. It's not about fighting for that space, it's really about filling that space together, because traditional sustainability touched on the human condition in terms of the environmental space, but its expertise was really on it, environmental sustainability from energy, resource management, and our climate. So as we understand we're not fighting for that space, you can go to the next slide if you would, the ability to also understand that it is about the human condition. So if you move on to that standard, as we are, I don't expect any of us to potentially be cardiovascular experts, muscular experts, skeletal experts, but the ability to recognize as you go through the standard, the physical sign of it's not ductwork, it's not steel, it's not vacation, it's not smoking cessation, it is all the human elements, whether it's muscular, respiratory, cardiovascular. So it's just a mental reminder that everything we really do is about the human condition, and it's about a comprehensive human condition. It starts with the air we breathe, and it encourages not just great filtration and great air quality, but how do we maintain the space overall. You can go back to the other slide. The ability to also understand it's not just about design, it's about the nourishment that we put in the space. It's about healthier choices. Not necessarily banning French fries and Coca-Cola, but understanding what portion size does to us, and how we present cafeteria, how we encourage fitness, how we make it part of the overall workspace, how we let comfort and fitness actually work together, the ability to move around an office and to be able to become firmly comfortable and at the same time get some mild physical activity aren't just interesting things. They're medically proven to improve your accuracy and cognitive skills, as well as some of the new technologies regarding light and mind. Up to that next slide, one of the things we actually try to reinforce is it is about behavior. It is about operations and design, where in many cases traditional sustainability was all about I designed it and hope they operate it properly. This one is a three-legged stool. You can't have a platinum project unless you have platinum behavior, platinum design, and platinum operation, and we all know that. And so the ability, as I mentioned earlier, to engage both the design community, the facilities and operation, and human resources group to be an employer of choice and to be able to get the best productivity, both in terms of work product and well-being is key, and that's the basis of the standard. So the ability also to understand that there is a lot of information out there at any particular time and place, and the ability to provide clarity. It's not about guaranteeing anything, but it's about the probability that if we improve the quality of the workspace by evidence-based science, and that's health science, social science, we're going to get better results from people. And the component is that you Google enough websites and you're going to find out that 3 cheeseburgers a day might be healthy. In fact, we know that it's the ability to put all of these things together in a work environment that's the challenge. Next. So the ability to say, we talk about the Well Living Lab, and I bring this all together to say that the standard is a great spot, but you can go on to the next slide, is how do we take those individual pieces of information and say it's important? And the importance is the ability to take evidence-based work and the ability to have us work with the Mayo Clinic to actually provide more than just inch-wide, mile-deep research, to be able to put all these elements together to help create better environments is the challenge. But knowing that better environments, when you put people in them, will yield better results is the overall pretext. And frankly, it's a pretty obvious situation as we move forward. Next. So with that, we're going to move on. We've covered a fair amount of information, and ideally we're saving a lot of time for great questions. But again, it's about the people. It's not about being in conflict with sustainability. It's about making it work. But it's also engaging so much more of the humanistic side, which includes that employer of choice and the ability to create great environments for our people. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lee.
Hey, thanks a bunch, Phil. And that's a good reminder, just as Phil was wrapping up, that now is a good time, anytime's a good time, earlier the better, to start getting your questions in. So jump into that question and answer function of your webinar. And anything you've heard from Phil is fair game to start throwing questions his way. Those of you who have worked in this field for a long time know that one of the strongest psychological principles trending has been behavioral economics. Phil alluded to it some. Most of you have read Nudge, Thaler's wonderful notion that choice architecture is something within our grasp. Phil gave good examples. The book I would commend right alongside Thaler's Nudge is The Healthy Workplace by our speaker Lee Stringer. So you'll be able to move, as Phil moved us already, from this idea of choice architecture to actual architecture as it relates to how these decisions and choices influence behavior. So Lee, we're delighted to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Paul. Well, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the research that's in the book, and also give you just lots of examples of what healthy space looks like. Because at the end of the day, nothing beats good visuals. So just to dive in, I think it's important to take a step back. I love to spend a lot of my time working on workplaces. And I'm going to take a step way back, and within 10 minutes give you the history of work, starting about 2 million years ago. Next slide. So, back in the day, this is what our workplace looked like. The African savanna, green trees. We were hunting, we were gathering, we were scavenging, and most of our day was outside. According to modern paleoanthropologists, we were walking maybe 9 miles a day and doing so at a slow pace. And then if you fast forward to about 10,000 years ago, a big change happened. We started farming. Our cities were born, and we started planting and living in a spot, mostly outdoors, but we were doing pretty heavy labor. Again, paleoanthropologists, particularly some who've looked at Amish communities, which do subsistence farming the way we used to do ages ago, claim that men in those communities walk about 8 miles a day, 7 or 8 miles a day, and women slightly less, but it's still heavy labor. And again, we're outdoors in the sunshine. Then you go and fast forward to about 1700s, the Industrial Revolution, and this is the big moment in history when we moved indoors. We were in dark, pretty noxious environments for many, many hours a day. The good news is that we were moving. We were actually moving around and moving equipment and things like that. But of course, we all know the horrible issues with the Industrial Revolution in terms of air quality and also just quality of life. So fast forward to a different kind of industry, which this is moving paper, not moving machines. I love this example of the apartment with Jack Lemmon, but it kind of illustrates well this kind of workplace that we've seen in movies, maybe our grandparents sat in, with lots of typewriters everywhere, big open environments. It feels like a factory, but it's not, and perhaps the air is a little better quality. Sometimes not much. It depends on where you're looking at. But this is really modern industry. These big buildings in New York and San Francisco, everywhere, were flooded with it. And now, fast forward a little bit more, this is kind of what most people's workplaces look like today. We're kind of Cro-Magnon style, sitting over a laptop, staring at a computer. There may or may not be a plant in the room, but it's a fairly sad statement about movement, about light and nature, and we've come so far from where we used to be 2 million years ago. And really, what we're trying to do is get back to that, get back to what our DNA really responds best to. So our environment, it really does shape our behavior. And how can we leverage it to shape it in ways that are very specific to health? And I'm going to focus the next few minutes on movement and on stress reduction. There are lots of other parts and pieces to this, but I'll just to give you a taste of some of the research. So this is an example of movement. Of course, we all know designing a fancy, gorgeous stair with glass and light and collaboration and encouraging people running into each other. This is what everyone loves and desires. But not everybody has that kind of budget. And in fact, if you go to the next slide, this is a wonderful site Laura Putnam actually tuned me into from the CDC, where they're actually looking at, in their stairwell program, what most of our offices have, which are these fire stairs, not so attractive, dark, dismal, and we know based on all kinds of research that they're not used. They're scary, particularly for women, but really for anyone, and they're out of sight, and so we don't necessarily use them. And go to the next. And so what CDC is doing, and lots of other smart companies are doing, is using a little paint, a little art, some music, piping in music, and putting in excellent signage, which encourages movement and stairs. In fact, just putting up a sign saying, by the elevator saying, hey, you know, if you could just use the stairs, you'd burn this many calories, save all this energy. People are significantly more likely to take the stairs. And so they've done all sorts of things. You can go to their website and actually use all the resources. They post them there. Another way to encourage movement is actually to create a new kind of seating arrangement. In the world of workplace, we call these neighborhoods or activity-based work settings or neighborhoods where you're not necessarily assigned a seat, but you are assigned to an area where you can work lots of different ways. A recent study looking at this environment versus a traditional environment where everybody's assigned a seat and goes down and sits in a cube all day, is that people are much more likely to stand in these environments. They weren't it was a small study. They didn't find that people walked more, although I'm sure they do, because they're moving from place to place, but they certainly did find that standing was an improvement, which is great, and they use these funky little devices to measure it. Keep going. So another example, of course, is the treadmill. The infamous treadmill desk. I saw an example recently of, well, actually the Motley Fool is an example of their space, and they use these Batsu balls and sitting, just you name it. Who knows if they're really good for ergonomics, some of them. But question about the balls. But certainly the Batsu standing. I saw a surfboard recently that people can surf at their desk. Great for core work. Keep going. And let's see what else we have. Oh, yes, I love this one. This is the Amsterdam airport where they have installed these charging stations. You can charge your laptop, but you have to cycle, which I love. So encouraging movement at the airport. You know, we're all sitting there for long periods of time. This is an example of Hamburg when they were trying to promote bringing the Olympics in 2024. And who doesn't want to run down the stairs in this option? But part of it is just making it fun, you know, thinking of architecture as a landscape that you can do something other than this, the way we typically treat office spaces. It's good to be fun. Keep going. What else do I have? Oh, yes. I was just in Vancouver and was really charmed by these stairs in a government building, which encourage really inclusive design. You can be in a wheelchair, you can be on a bike, you can walk, you can hike, you can go up and down in a beautiful, graceful way in this public space. And it was just wonderfully executed. I would love to see more of these in and around our buildings. Okay, so stress reduction. Some of you may have heard there's this thing called biophilia. And it was, it's been around for a while. It was a term that was reintroduced by E.O. Wilson, who's an environmentalist. And the idea is that humans have a preference, strong preference, to be in and among nature. This is an example from a student who actually did a study of, you can imagine this is a healthcare facility anywhere, doesn't even matter. Go to the next slide. And what they were looking at was kind of a lighting installation and showing, wow, you know, if you made it feel like you're in a forest, how different you would feel going through, and almost restorative it would feel to go through a different sort of space with backlighting. And you don't even need, you know, a window. You can play around with that. This is a new example of space. Amazon's bubbles, I forgot what they call them, but they're these circular environments where they're literally putting in botanical gardens into their office spaces as a way to restore, you know, psychological restoration and provide a place to relax and maybe even teach folks that there are such things as different kind of plants, you know, and to get to know and reintroduce local and not so local nature to the workers. Keep going. There's also this idea of opening up nature. So this is an example of, this is called skyfold walls, and this is a maker space that EYP designed. I love it. It opens up. It's in San Antonio, a pretty warm climate. But the idea is you can open up an existing space or classroom into actual nature and instantly make an indoor-outdoor space. Keep going. There is let's see what else do I have in there. Oh, yes. We're also trying to program outdoor space more. If you've been to any of the recent furniture manufacturer events, they're really showcasing outdoor furniture because there's a recognition that we do need to be outdoors more. We need to design spaces to be outdoors more. And this is just an example of making a space usable outdoors. Keep going. And then there's this wonderful, this is again kind of biophilia, but this is another space that we're designing for. It happens to be another higher ed project. But these are these lovely felt trees, I guess. They look like clouds in this picture, but the idea with biophilia is it can mimic nature. It doesn't have to even be actual nature, but using green, using astroturf, using things that look like trees or clouds or things from the natural environment are very, very good to use as well, and integrate wood, natural wood. Here's an example. This is from a Japanese furniture showroom. The picture's not the best, but these are actually felt walls that are hanging tapestries that can break up space but also mimic nature, as you can see. This is kind of the freshest, latest thing off the press. And again, it's all about reducing stress, and it has this effect on us. The other popular thing that's happening within corporations and hospitals and lots of places is this idea of gardens and gardening, and it's really allowing people to grow food. They might not be able to do it in their Manhattan apartment, but allowing them to do it on the roof and have a little bit of a share of space, or at least be engaged in gardening. When people garden in groups, they're much more likely to eat healthy than if they garden individually. So the workplace is a perfect place to make this happen. Keep going. I wanted to wrap with just kind of one of the projects that I'm working on now with Harvard School of Public Health and their SHINE group. One of the things that they're trying to create is a health and human performance index, and it's really trying to tie all these things together. We were just, talking about this idea of tying disciplines together. What they've done, they were working with Johnson & Johnson and lots of others, looking at surveys and other indicators within different organizations and tying well-being, productivity, engagement, and culture, click. And then finally, I'm working with them to also connect the built environment and attributes and amenities in the built environment with all these other parts and pieces so that they talk to each other and that we have research that connects it. This is an example of the index at EYP. We actually use it for our own offices, and on the bottom you can see each one of our offices. And one of the things that jumped off the page to Harvard is that they saw a direct correlation between the office locations and the amount of green space in those office locations, and that people were significantly more likely to exercise in locations where there was green space adjacent to the office space. There's been research findings like this in lots of places, but nothing beats having it in your own home and knowing that you as a company can affect the health of your people. If you think about location, of course this is the High Line in New York, and it is, having that being locating, it's one of the prime real estate, because they put green in, it's transformed this neighborhood, and I think we can transform our cities as well as our workplaces by bringing the indoors or outdoors in. And I love this quote. I think it's great. I think that architects do have to be public health officials more and more, and we have to be wise about what you all live and breathe every day in terms of health and well-being. We need to be conversant in all of those tools and manifest physical workplaces so that they support all these awesome programs that are coming out of the woodworks. They have to talk to each other to really work.
Nicely done, Lee. Thanks a ton. So I, again, invite our audience to start thinking about questions and comments that you have for our experts. And we're going to go back to a very similar poll question in just a second. But let me start the conversation by reminding Phil and Lee that not only are we very jazzed to have experts like you find your way into working with health promotion experts in the workplace, But we have a lot to learn, not just in terms of your subject knowledge, but also in terms of how you guys are building the case for what you do. If I were to characterize the work of the last 25 years in workplace-based health promotion that's focused on individual behavior change, it's been this interesting dual challenge of proving the effectiveness of various educational and environmental interventions alongside building the case for why it's worth investing in these kinds of interventions. So when you think about the leadership you're bringing to your respective fields in architecture and engineering, can you talk a little bit, maybe starting with you, Lee, about what it's like to sell a healthy workplace when you're not with health people, when you're actually with the facilities people? How much do you have to prove a return on investment compared to other values that you need to show some science credibility to advance when, the bottom line is the bottom line in terms of the extra cost it might take to build certain features into the environment. Lee, starting with you, what's the case that you find yourself making most often, the ROI kind of case or the science case or some other case altogether?
Yes. I find that I have to make every case and hit it from every direction. I will say that often when we're advising our clients, who are often real estate folks or facilities folks, really we're selling them to sell their boss, right? We're selling them to sell the CEO or the C-suite. So ultimately it is an ROI decision. Ultimately it is about, putting in front of them some of the studies by Ron Gutzel and Ray Fabius and many of the things that, the wonderful stories that and real facts that they've been able to put on the table. I think it's also has to do with, it's a much easier sell than sustainability sometimes when it comes to the C-suite. Now, the real estate folks, we have been in the world, and architects love sustainability. We love this idea of green and the earth and taking care of the planet. That's kind of like inherent in our schooling as designers. So we buy into that, and so we'll sell the green workplace or the green building to building owners and to leaders because we authentically believe in it. But the health, we need some coaching in. The health, believe it or not, it's an easier sell to leaders because they get it. They understand, wow, I do need to be healthy and I do want a healthy place for my people, and just help me, give a little more ROI and some more juice to this. But I think, for us as professionals in the world of real estate, and I'm, putting that hat on, I feel like it's a little harder sometimes to sell the health because it's just not in our training as much. And shame on us for not doing that. I think that's changing.
Well, it's an early movement you guys are leading, so I love your yes, yes, and yes answer. I wish we had done more of that early in the health promotion movement in the workplace. Phil, I'm going to turn the same question to you, but before I do that, I'm going to launch this poll as well. So it's up on the screen. You remember I said, where do you have most influence? Now let's ask our colleagues where they think they're really nailing it already. So my organization is already a high performer as a healthy workplace on any of the following, and choose any that apply, you guys. So promoting exercise, movement, taking stairs, fitness facilities, walking paths, that kind of stuff. Leadership support. C, light or noise or heat. You learn so much about those influences if you join Phil at the Mayo Well Learning Lab. Healthy food choices, or E, sleep support. So go ahead and Marlene, launch this. So we're got answers coming in fast and furious again. But Phil, before I launch the results of that, reflect a little bit back from your vantage point as an engineer early in this movement to create healthier workspaces. I love your quote that you taught me down at Mayo. Your lot in life is to turn spaces into places. I love that point of view. How do you sell it? Is it an ROI sale or is it something else?
Well, the answer is ideally we're normally time trapped into this whole. The ROI in most cases is the final phase to stop good ideas. Only because in most cases nothing is guaranteed. And it's all about probability. And sometimes we'll see the C-suite basically say, guys, my right brain gets it. Give me the justification. So sometimes what we do is understand it's not necessarily more money, it's smarter money. We spend a lot of money in our spaces already. How about just spending some of that discretionary money in a more focused way? in terms of what we do in terms of architecture. But we recognize that only 1 to 2% of the spaces are new. So a lot of our focus is on the existing space. What can we potentially do to turn a good space into a great space? Yeah. I like to be able to turn the numbers on their head a little bit. We have a tendency to talk in the design world and real estate world about dollar per square foot. How about we turn it into dollar per person? And then how about we understand what that person is worth on a time basis and turn it into how many minutes would it take to recover this cost? Yeah. There's a lot of economic decisions based upon time and information as opposed to a square foot of real estate. So I changed the math a little bit, and it turns out to be for $65 a year per person, if I could institute a vast majority of these, would it be worth it? And if that person is anywhere worth their time, that turns out to be about a minute a day. So, you know, that kind of logic all of a sudden turns out to be, it's real money. You always acknowledge it's real money. But I would say that potentially we sometimes focus on the wrong thing and recognize that let's not spend more money, but spend the money we've got wiser. Because I think there's a tremendous amount of resources there that potentially aren't based upon a lot of fact. They're based on a lot of intuition. And the work that Lee's doing, the work that all those medical institutions are doing, the work Harvard continues to do, that Mayo continues to do, is only going to, in some respects, drive it from a obvious decision to a no-brainer in terms of what we've seen.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So take a look at these results. A little more interesting variation this time. And Phil, let me just start with you for a reaction. What we see is this field, again, mostly represented on the HERO webinar with HR and wellness professionals. Over the last, I'd say at least 30 years of this work, 81% are doing, saying we're doing pretty darn good on physical activity. Also, really strong showing on leadership support. But take a look on healthy food choices, taking your sentiment, Phil. I think the fact that 52% are saying no, we're not there yet on healthy food choices is quite attention-getting for me. And then look further into light and sleep support. Phil, let me start with you, and Lee, have you guys both react to this as well. Phil, any reactions to where they think they're already high performers?
I am not surprised. I like this because when we go over ours, people get the exercise component. A few years ago, it was you thought you'd have the gym and get your heart rate up to 120 beats per minute. Now they recognize, that social interaction is not just moving around your body. It provides a great social interaction component as well. I think for the people in this audience, they probably have strong leadership. I'm not saying that this group isn't representative of the entire population. But I would say the people who aren't on this call probably don't have that green bar up as much. The two items that get the most conversation are light and food choices, which tells me that those are the areas that people probably aren't as comfortable in. So I'm really excited that my empirical work, when I do a presentation, when I go over those 7 from air to water to nutrition to fitness, the two that get the most conversation are light, because of the fact we've done such a poor job in the recognition that Mother Nature provides the best light, how do we utilize it properly, and some new technology. And the fact that food are personal choices, that you are the only ones that can control. The HVAC's by somebody else. You can always point to the light by somebody. They don't give me a sit-stand desk. Nutrition is your personal component that extends far beyond the workplace. So I'm encouraged that these two are the ones that people think they need the most work on because those are the most engaging in most conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Lee is, I've stolen her quote often. She's told me now and then that I've got a solution that involves 100% engagement of an employee population. So, Phil, you just summarized that well as well. Lee, let me have you react to this, but also have you react to Rebecca's question that came in on our Q&A, and that is, this certainly seems feasible for offices, what you guys are talking about, but how do we better affect call centers or warehouses? These are the locations where environmental support is very lacking. So, Lee, thoughts on that in the context of our results here as well?
Yeah, well, diving straight into the light thing, that is a huge issue. And I was just talking to GE, and they are actually looking at circadian lighting on their factory floor and actually comparing productivity with the circadian lighting in one of their factories versus one that doesn't have it. I'm like, well, that's going to be a no-brainer. It's pretty, it's interesting. I actually recently went to a school where they had circadian lighting installed and looked at the before and after. They'd only done it in one room, and it's unbelievably awesome. It's like so much better and so much. You feel great. It's hard to describe. It's almost like you need a before and after kind of example. Maybe at Mayo, we could all go up there and see that, just to really feel how your well-being increases and all of that. They're seeing increased grades, improved grades in students. Amazing. So same with the factory. I anticipate that the results will come out of that. And any place, I think lighting is like one of the first things that you can do. And of course, you have to think about shift work and the unique lighting conditions required for shift work, but bright light for shift workers is really good, and it's going to help their safety as well, having that on, in alternate hours. What else about, I think, smoking cessation comes up a lot when in manufacturing, and that seems to be, it's a problem everywhere. Still, we keep trying. There are a lot of really effective tools we have, but that seems to come up a lot. So smells and pollution, air pollution that we're creating ourselves, not just created by the products that we're making, is also, continues to be an issue. And I guess I would say, for my friends at Harvard, in the public health school, they are very into air quality, and say that even in our offices, of course, manufacturing, of course, call centers and other places, the air quality is not so great. But in general, the codes for air quality are really, the threshold is very low. So we could do better. We need to raise the bar in terms of the quality of air, just in codes, so that we meet U.S. codes. And if we do that, that will hit every type of workspace that we are building in a building, which is a really good place to go in addition to lighting.
Paul, this is Phil. Can I add on to that?
Yeah, please.
It's a great question, because frankly, a call center is no different than an office. The fact is, they're knowledge workers, and everything that Lee talks about, or everything in the well building standard, is applicable. One of the things that I touched on briefly is the ability to start to affect our educational system. Lee touched on it again. It's the teachers in the classrooms. It's the ability to breathe air with light and acoustics and call it preventative medical intention, but at the same time do lifelong learning exercises from nutrition and or fitness for our kids. And it's not just about obesity, but the fact is physical education is essential for your mind. And we're doing some great work in residential work and a lot of focus on senior living, where you understand in an office, even in a long day, it's 8 to 10, 12 hours. A school is maybe 6 to 8 hours. How about a senior living community where it's 24 hours a day? The ability to do some wonderful things outside the office world, but let this office experience be that evidence-based peer-reviewed work, because biologically we're extremely similar between 8, 28, and 88. We change on the spectrum, but to understand we've got great things. Yeah.
Hey, let's try another poll, Lee, just in part to kind of stay on your question of how you answered it. Yes, yes, and yes, in terms of the value proposition. And we want to give you guys good information to work from, as well as our thinking here. Let's, of those who are participating here, let me put the emphasis on the word primary motivation on this question. My organization is going to become a healthier workplace because it's about increasing performance, productivity. It's about talent and keeping top people. It's about health and well-being. It's about increasing shareholder value, or truly these are equally weighted values if I think about selling some of the concepts you guys are talking about in my organization. So again, let me put the emphasis on primary, just so we can learn together about what's trending in your workplace. And Marlene's going to go ahead and launch that poll. And as we do that and think together about the last item, Lee, you also, as we're getting ready, you said you've even heard the term sleep architecture. Can you say a little bit about the concept? Because sleep, as you saw in our last poll, we're nowhere on that in the workplace yet.
Well, circadian lighting can help a great deal, as can, having a place to nap and other things like that. But sleep architecture is a term that's been thrown around lately. Not thrown around. It does exist in specialists in this field. And what it refers to are the number of cycles of your sleep, the stages of sleep, including stage 1, stage 2, 3, 4, REM sleep, the number of them that you have typically during an evening, and also just the kind of over the course of your sleep time, the psychological or the changes in your body, what's happening, your metabolism, your body's doing several things over the course of those sleep cycles. So kind of refers to the biorhythms that are restoring your body, which happen earlier in the evening, and restoring your mind and building on kind of absorbing everything that you learned the previous day, which happens kind of like from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. It's fascinating. We learn more every day about sleep, and I think the neuroscience is so early in what we really know about it. But it is pretty exciting to know that there are some things, particularly around lighting, getting outside, exposing yourself earlier in the day to sunlight, that really impact your sleep cycle later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Let's go ahead and launch the results of this poll. A little more variation also here. And Phil, let me start with you. So your notion that ROI is where good ideas go to die, look at that. Nobody's really naming shareholder value as a core reason for the concepts you guys are advancing. 30% talking about performance productivity. Half of them saying it's a health and well-being emphasis in my organization. And only 10%. I'm surprised. I often think people kind of default to, well, they're all important, as you said, Lee, but in this case, we have pretty strong showing for health and well-being. Any surprises there, Phil? Any reaction to those attitudes and motivations of these organizations?
Well, mine would be on it. The fact is that these are part of every decision-making process. And when you got 12 people around the table, and I'm going to challenge every organization in that there's going to be 1 or 2 people where it's about potential shareholder value and corporate responsibility. Some are going to be about the performance. If you're in the hiring mode, part of it is how do I keep the people I've got? I love the attention on attracting great talent, but the ability to keep that great talent and make that talent have a great workspace, really, to me, is A, B, and C all combined together. I think it's great. What I've seen sometimes is you put more real estate people in it, the numbers change a little bit on the investment world. You put this group potentially on the human resources side. This is pretty typical. You throw in the scientific element, and it has a tendency to be truly all about sleep. In other words, if we improve the human condition, we're going to get great results. So is it a leading indicator or a lagging indicator? It's interesting questions.
Yeah, interesting. Lee, I'm going to have you react as well. But before we do that, we're going to launch one last poll question for our audience. If you were the CEO, you're in charge of decision-making, and in particular, you're a penny-pinching CEO at that. The changes I'd put as our first priority, and you get to only pick 2, you guys, on this one. So the first priorities, we'll see how influential you guys have been in the attitudes you've brought to your presentations. My first priority would be the lighting and visual ambiance, the sound, noise issues, space layout, flexible schedules, or remote virtual work policies. So you guys get to pick 2. You're in charge. You're wanting to do the parsimonious thing, the frugal thing, the thing that is the best bang for my buck. So go ahead, Marlene's going to launch that poll. And as she waits for some final input for you guys to react to, again, Lee, any particular takeaway from the fact that shareholder value in that last poll was not a big concern, and the health and well-being thing seemed like the primary motivation?
It does seem like, of course, folks on the phone have probably been in this industry for a long time, but there is this like Weltanschauung happening everywhere where, everyone's on the bandwagon, which is wonderful. I mean, it's just a huge industry, the health and wellness industry. I will say, just taking a step back, I was thinking about all of the leaders that I've spoken with and interviewed and talked to them about their workplace and their work wellness programs. And I remember meeting Ray Anderson from Interface Carpet, and I was asking him about how he changed his organization. He was really looking to make it more sustainable. And like, how did you get people to really get on the bandwagon around sustainability? This was years ago. And he's like, you know what, Lee? I did it one mind at a time. And I think when I think about health and wellness, and I think about the leaders out there who really get it, understand it as a motivator, as an engager, as a form of increasing productivity and launching their business into the stratosphere from a sales and revenue perspective, they get that they have to really tap into their people in a deep, deep way. And I mean, a lot of times it's something scary in their life that's jumped them into this rationale. Sometimes they just, are at a point when they're ready to hear the message. But it is a one mind at a time kind of thing. It's very personal, right? And so when we're convincing folks and trying to make a business case, we're doing so with numbers, and it is an important part of the puzzle, but it's also engaging them in a way that really help them recognize it personally to them as leaders and why they're going to be a better leader and why their company is going to be better as a result by doing this stuff.
Yeah, very cool. Well, let's wrap up with your reactions to your colleague's ruler of the world. If I ran the place, I'm going to head first for flexible scheduling policies. And I think you guys were pretty darn influential. I wish we had done this as a pre-survey, because you really nailed it on getting them thinking about light and visual ambiance. But they're also with you on getting after the physical space itself, sound, and virtual workspaces. So all cool stuff to be working on. What's your reaction? Would those have been your picks, Bill, starting with you?
Well, mine is the ability, flexible scheduling really is a big stress relief. Can I go take my kids to school? Do I have the flexibility? And most of the time when you provide flexibility, they still work the 95% of the time at work when they need to. But the ability to have that relief, because stress, I'm going to go back to Lee's, is probably most induced by things outside of the work environment that somehow preclude or intrude on work, intrudes on your personal life, and when personal life starts to influence your work. As businesses have that flexibility, they can remove that outside of the physical environment. This is very insightful.
Mm-hmm. And Lee, any reaction for you?
I think the overlay maybe to all of this is about flexibility and control. I mean, there's so much research that shows that the more control workers have, the less likely they are, regardless of their job, to have less heart disease, to decrease stress, as you were just saying, Phil, and increase productivity. And whether that means working at home or in the soccer field, or flexible with when you come in, or even in the physical space, having some flexibility about how, when you work, it's standing, sitting, squatting, outdoors, whatever your choice. I think more choice is a theme that's running through a lot of workplaces now that has a direct correlation to stress reduction and also health, and it's a win-win. So I love these responses, because I think it several of them kind of cover that.
Yeah. Well, one of the conventions in behavior change that you guys are going to help advance relates to that autonomy element. Everyone in our field spends a lot of our time talking about motivation and what creates more intrinsic and as well as using extrinsic motivation. Spend a lot of our time on skills and ability, but Lee, you've addressed wonderfully the fact that autonomy is yet another element that's core to evoking behavior change that's positive. So thank you two so much. You are really a delight. I am so happy for our field. I consider it a maturation indicator that folks like you are interested in and contributing to the field of workplace wellness. So we need you. We want you to keep continuing to influence us with your expertise, and we'll see you and everybody else hopefully on this call at Hero Forum 16. Our theme is leading in well-being, and I'm serious about themes, so you'll see examples trending throughout the 3 days of leadership and what it means to lead in these areas and in well-being, and what it means to apply those principles to employees, families, and communities. So we're going to be at the Lowe's Atlanta Hotel. We'll see you two, along with lots of other smart people and eager learnings on September 27th through 29th. So thanks again, Lee. Thanks again, Phil. We'll be eager to see you there. Thanks for doing such a great job today of previewing why we're all excited to get down there.
Look forward to seeing you guys.
Hey, Paul, thank you so much. One last quote. I love Lee. This is one I got from Roger Johnson, who's Senior Vice President at Toronto Dominion Bank. He said, some people let numbers drive their actions. Others let actions drive their numbers. Yeah. And I think that speaks to the leadership component that Lee spoke on earlier. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. That is a wonderful final word. With that, we are all adjourned and signing off. Thanks again, you guys. Goodbye to all, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.